Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Well Versed. I'm your host, Layman, and today's episode I'm super excited about, especially because I have someone who I kind of think is an expert in this space. She probably doesn't like me saying that, but I really feel like she has a lot of experience. And we're going to get into topics on dating, why dating is so exhausting, why you need to decenter men, which is a common phrase we hear all the time online, but like, what does it actually mean to decenter men? And yeah, how to not die alone. No, I'm kidding, not on that. But here with me today, I have Barbie. Barbie, welcome to Well Versed.
Thank you. I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this for so many weeks. I think when you started out, I was like, yeah, I can't wait to be on the podcast. So I'm your number one fan. So
Thank you.
really, thank you for having me on.
And thank you for coming on. And you guys, honestly, she literally listens to the actual podcast and gives me feedback. And I trust her feedback because I can see my analytics. Okay, you guys, I can see who's listening and I see her listenership in the UK. So I appreciate you for supporting me. But I wonder if we should tell people how we know each other before I
Oh my God,
introduce you.
yeah. Yeah, that would be cool. Go
Okay,
on.
you go.
Oh, okay. No, it's very simple. There's no sort of, crazy story to it. We met on Bumble BFF. So yeah, that's one of my favorite apps for meeting people, I think, meeting women in particular. And I had moved to New York and I was looking for new friends. So I was just like putting myself out there, reaching out to anyone that was compatible with me. And that's how we came in contact.
Yeah, and it's actually so interesting too because I hear so many people have crazy BFF stories, which BFF is crazy. But luckily, I've never met anyone too crazy on there. Barbie has. That's probably a story for another day. But we essentially just met on BFF, and then another girl that I knew organized like a BFF dinner, and we went out with two other girls, and it ended up being pretty good. And it's so funny that my perception of you when I first met you is so different than who I know now, which is
Oh my
hilarious.
God. I want
Yeah,
to know. Tell me
because
right
you were
now.
so mysterious. Like you were so like, I just moved from the UK. I have an apartment uptown, but I'm like gonna stay in a hotel tonight. And I'm like, what is this double life? Like, what does this girl do? Like, it was just so mysterious and like, it seemed like you lived in New York, but you also weren't like really living in New York. You're kind of like living everywhere. I don't know, but Barbie's cool. She's such good vibes. So I'm excited to have you on. But before we start, I want you to tell people what you do because you do many things, but specifically more recently, you're doing something really exciting, which is building out a dating app. So tell everyone a little bit about what you do and kind of what you're working on.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. But yeah, what am I doing right now? So when I got laid off a few months ago. Well, it's more than a few months now, isn't it? And I got laid off I'd say sometime in September. I remember because I had to leave New York and move back to the UK, etc., etc. I actually was living in New York, but I have this habit of just kind of meandering from place to place. I'm a Sagittarius. I don't know what to tell you. When I left New York, I started to, try to figure out what to do, what problem I wanted to solve, because I knew one thing for sure. I did not want to go back to my 9 to 5. And I've always been really interested in the dating problem, like solving community problems and just, helping people connect with each other, et cetera, et cetera. And so that brought me to this sort of point of, I guess, creativity where I'm looking at what are the things I'm good at, what are the problems I want to be solving in this life, what's the legacy I want to leave. And honestly, when I think about what kind of problem would I wake up every single day to solve, what do I
That's
want to
me.
talk about every single day? Definitely dating, definitely friendships, definitely relationships with people. And so that brought me to build Summon, which is, I think, the next generation of dating apps that the Gen Zs and millennials are going to be using. Because, like you said, we're all sick and tired of dating apps. Like online dating, the industry itself has not really innovated in a long time, and they're not incentivized to innovate because at the end of the day, this is their business model. They rely on you not deleting the app, and even if you do delete the app, they rely on you coming back to the app. So that's their business model. Your singleness is their business model. And so I thought to myself, once and for all, I really want to just approach the dating industry in a completely different way And part of that is tackling and discussing, having real conversations about what really is the problem, what really is affecting all of us. And if we look really deep into it, it comes down to the cultural polarization between men and women nowadays. So that's it. That's what I'm tackling. That's what I'm up to. I mean, it sounds mysterious, like you said, but
Yeah, that's
hopefully
a
that
lot.
sums it up.
Honestly, dating apps are, and as someone who's been on them, I'm exhausted. I'm burnt out. And in 2024, I was like, I'm leaving these dating apps behind me. I will go on one in 2025, especially Summon, but besides that, I'm just over all the ones that are in the market right now. They've created like a level of burnout that is just so hard to recover from. And then it also gives you just a negative perception on dating. So I'm glad
Mm.
that you're working on something that's different, that's not meant to thrive off of people's singleness and that yeah, like the singleness is the business model. So I'm
Yeah.
excited for Summit and especially for this convo today because I know you've done a lot of research talking to people, but then you also have live experience in the dating game. So we're gonna get into it, but first, okay, so one thing that I wanted to start this conversation off with is I'm curious on your perception as a dating anthropologist. I just made that up right now. Why is dating so bad? Like, why is dating so bad? And is it actually bad or is it just our perception?
Oh, so yes, why is dating bad, or is dating really bad? Is that just, I guess, figment of our imagination? Is that just something everyone's talking about and it's not real? I mean, yes, dating is bad. It's horrendous. Let's just be honest. And I think the why that I am exploring is, you know, the real why. Like, it's not a question of is it bad or is it not bad? Like, it's actually awful. Everyone can attest to that. Men are complaining
Mm.
about it. Women are complaining about it. And so this is a known issue. But I think that the reason why, like I mentioned earlier, just goes back to that polarization of men and women. Men and women have never been more culturally different than they are today, like in this world today. So if we think about back in the day, women really needed to rely on men for different things. And so that meant performing a level of femininity and things like that, just really having to adhere to whatever societal standards and requirements were for women. And nowadays, they don't have to anymore. Women's sort of relationship with money has changed. Our relationship with resources has changed. And so our needs in a relationship with men are also different, and men don't know how to cope with that. Like, they don't know what to do with that because they haven't been socialized to really respond to that adequately. So there's so much that we could say, and I know we're going to get into it, but yeah, it becomes a very interesting topic. And then, we're looking at it through like a lens of heterosexuality as well, whereas there are gay people and, bi people who are complaining pretty much about the same things, but just like in other ways. And I think heterosexuality is like a unique sort of lens to look at it through. So it's also the idea that all these other people are still having very similar issues, but just manifesting themselves in different ways, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that like I hate to say this, there's a little bit of like a gender war that's happening right now that I hate. But also, I feel like it just comes down to the fact that we have so much access, but it's a fake type of access. Like right now, maybe back in the day, you could see everyone within like your 10-mile radius, and that was it. And now with like social media, you could see who's in freaking Belgium and the UK and DC and New York. So I feel like it just gives people a false sense of reality and what they have access to. And then, you know, I hate to say this, but maybe from a male perspective, you were happy with like the all you saw was the women you grew up with, and so that's what you like, that's what you date. Then you see different types of women all around the world, and then you think that you could maybe like get those women. And I do also feel, and this is controversial, but people don't have a good perception of their market value in dating. I don't know. I feel bad saying that because someone's going to listen to this and be like, who do you think you are defining someone's market value? But people who are similar usually mate, like same education, economic status, similar attractiveness, financial. So, yeah, I think it's like a combination of the two, but definitely because people are just having so much access to everything on social media, they have like a false perception of reality, what they can get, what is available to them, but also a false sense of how real people actually look day to day. Like that's a big one. Like social media is all filtered, everyone looks so beautiful, and it's like you do not see people like that every day. Like the
Yeah.
average person looks normal and the average person is not putting all of that into their appearance. So I don't know if you agree on that one, but
Yeah, I mean, I definitely say I agree with most of that. The market value conversation is generally factual. It's one that I tend to like try to steer clear of, but I know that it's completely accurate in the sense that yes, there is a dating market and we are participants in that market if we're looking to date, right? So ultimately, you kind of have to be looking at it through the lens of how do people perceive me. But I also think that a lot of love has to do with luck. And there almost is no sort of ebook that you can find, and there's no tips, there's no advice. You know, I see a lot of advice on the internet where women are being told to go sit at bars and join a golf club and, you know, try all these different things. And you know, they're doing all these things in hopes that they will find a suitable mate or a mate who is like miles wealthier than them or whatever. But I don't necessarily think that that's the path to finding a rich man or a good man to settle down with, because you know riches is one thing, and then having like a quality mate is actually a whole completely other like different thing. So I just think to that point, like to the point you're making, while I agree that there's a dating market, it's not enough to just put oneself on the dating market. Like there also are elements of luck. You have to be compatible with that person. You have to share core values. What do you define as a successful relationship, et cetera, et cetera. I interviewed over 100 men, and that's counting now because we're doing interviews every day. And we asked the question, what is your biggest fear when it comes to dating? And the vast majority of them said catfishing. But when I probed further and said, okay, so like, when was the last time you were catfished and what did that look like? Like, how did that manifest itself? They really didn't have any stories to tell. Like, they didn't have any major catfishing stories to tell. Sorry, you froze there for a second. But yeah, they didn't have any catfishing stories to tell. And the ones that did, about 15% of them did have a story. You know, it was either something that had happened to a friend of a friend or someone that they knew. And when it did happen to them, it had more to do with like, oh, you know, she had blonde hair in her profile, and then she came out to the date with a black bob. So is that catfishing, or is, you know, but to a certain extent, our perception of what people should look like in real life is definitely changing, whether that's because of filters and social media or because of fillers and Botox and surgery and things like that. Our expectations and our standards are definitely evolving. So I'm completely with you on there. But yeah, the market value thing, definitely a little sensitive for a lot of people, you know, who but
yeah,
it's
but
factual.
but girl, honestly, let's be real. I feel like people are catfishing.
What do you define as catfishing? And what does that look like to you? Tell me more. Tell me more.
It was just they didn't look like their picture. Like I was looking for them and I couldn't spot them.
But like in what way? Were they bigger? Were they
I've
um
had like bigger. I've had someone that I thought I was meeting that was much bigger. So by default, I think when you have weight on you, you look different. So I do think people kind of catfish.
then I would love to have you as a user interviewer. Sorry, interviewee, because that would be interesting to sort of also see the woman's perspective on this, in the sense of like, but I guess women aren't really panicked about going on dates with men catfishing. I had a few women tell me that men lied about their heights, but beyond that, it wasn't really much. And the men that did get catfished talked about weight, but they didn't talk about features or anything along those lines, you know, like the eyes and the noses and things like that. But that is quite interesting that I haven't seen it come up just yet, like in any meaningful way in my sort of interview sessions, but those are still happening. So, hey, I might come back on your podcast if you'll have me in like 6 months and tell you everyone's catfishing, girl, beware.
And honestly, I think there's a small level of catfish on dating apps just by default. It's like two-dimensional. People are not going to look alike. Like you said, different hair color, different style. But even men lying about their height is a form of catfishing. Like you're a catfish. And I don't care
Yeah,
what
no,
anyone
that's
says, like you're a
definitely.
catfish.
Yeah. Not only do you go out of your way to like just put a false height on there, you know that that will get the woman out to the date, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like that in itself, I mean, there's no worse way to catfish someone as long as you're not like we're not talking about people stealing people's money or scamming people. At the end of the day, we're just talking about physical appearance. So it's just, yeah, it kind of sucks, but it comes with online dating, doesn't it? At the end of the day, people are going to put their best foot forward and see what they can get. And the way dating apps are set up nowadays, people are kind of auditioning for you to choose them. Like, pick me, choose me, love me. It's like that's the vibe. Like everyone wants to be chosen. So they're going to do a little sort of, I don't know, hopefully they're not outright lying, but you're kind of going to think about what other things men and women are going to like depending on who you are and who you want to date. So yeah, it's just comes with the territory, I guess.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me that just is annoying is the height. Will be so delusional about height. Like lying about 2 inches, 3 inches is great, but I've gone on a date with a guy that said he was 6'1" and he was 5'1". Sir,
Did his
you
hand
didn't think
accidentally slip and
miss
hit the
yeah,
five
that's
instead?
that's what I was assuming. I was like he accidentally slipped, he hit the 6 instead of the 5. And then yeah, they think like you're just gonna come on the date and be okay with it. And I was like, you are shorter than I thought. So yeah, the catfishing is real. Don't catfish if you're listening to this. It's not worth it because ultimately, what are you looking for? Are you looking to be loved based on you? Or are you looking to trick someone into loving you? As someone who's working on a dating app and building this out, I'm sure you have your own personal experiences. So, what are some stories that have happened to you, like dating on the dating apps, where you were just like, okay, there needs to be something different? And do you think it was because of the dating apps, or were they just bad experiences with just men
Mm.
on their bad behavior?
So, as much as I go on a lot of dates, I wouldn't say that I've had many outright bad dates. And I think that's because I'm very picky when it comes to leaving my house and actually going on the date. I don't go on the date unless I've spoken to you for about 2 weeks or a week, depending if we like speak every day consistently.
Girl,
You know,
that's crazy.
I know the shortest I've ever gone on is no, well, no, it's not crazy. Like we're going out to meet strangers, isn't it? So, but
No,
the
I mean
shortest
like
I've ever gone on,
being in New York, did you notice like men, I feel like men here want to meet up so quickly.
they do. But
So you
I
just gotta
also think
chat them.
I noticed that a lot on Hinge, but then I was on the League
Right.
and I can't talk about the League because they're gonna kick me out, isn't it? I thought they kicked me out, but they didn't apparently. That was just me freaking out over nothing. So I texted you and I was like, they kicked me out. But no, they didn't. But
Did someone
no,
report
they
you for doing user research and not really being here for dating?
well, I don't honestly again, I can't say too much about them, but yeah, what I'm doing is nothing like what they're doing, to be fair. And yeah, I think they've taught me a lot about dating just from the men I've been able to meet there. And I think they're doing a great job, honestly. The League, great place to
Really?
meet. Um, for the kinds of men that I was looking to date and for the fact that I was in New York, I think it was very good. I will say on the League, I noticed that men were more willing to talk a little longer, whereas on other dating apps, they kind of just wanted to get to it. And the thing is with me, I will simply just not go. Like I'll simply just not date. If you're trying to rush the thing or just trying to be like, well, let's meet tomorrow or the day after tomorrow at a bar or wherever you think is a good date, that will just put me off completely because I really don't have to go, right? And me going, my presence, actually being there, getting dressed, getting ready, I like to do that for somebody who, at the very least, at the very basics, I know kind of just the covering, the fundamental covering of who you are. I have a pretty good summary of who you are, and a few prompts on Hinge is just not going to cut it, is it? Like it's not going to be enough for me to go, oh, he's cute. He's 6'3". He works in banking. Fine, I'll meet him tomorrow evening. Like, I just feel like there needs to be a lot more to the conversation. And that's one of the things that got me to think, okay, well, I really want to solve for this because I'm an intentional dater and I don't like to waste my time. And I'm very, very busy. When I was in New York, I was a chief product officer. I was working for a startup that was very quickly growing. Like, I know everyone's busy, but my time really meant a lot to me. And just going out with a bunch of random men, just not that there is any issue with it. Again, I think we all have a different sort of approaches to dating, isn't it? But it just didn't appeal to me because I generally don't enjoy men's company in that way unless I actually do like them. So I know that's quite controversial for me to say, but hey, like it is what it is.
Yeah, I get you. I think everyone dates really differently. You are really good with the conversations online and having back and forth text, I can acknowledge that I'm a dry bitch. Like, I'm not giving nothing at all. So by default, because I know I'm not giving nothing, I rather just meet with someone in person. But I then, because of that, the fact that I'm more willing to meet in person quickly, I rather, to be honest, do like a coffee date. Men never have
Mhm.
suggested that to me, which is weird. And also, like, the logistics of coffee dates are hard. But that's where I get annoyed. I can tell from the interaction or the dinner that I'm not in tune. We're never going to talk again. And now I'm stuck here for 2 hours. So waste of time. But I don't know. I just feel like everybody is really, really obsessed with dating. You know, you said you were a CPO and your time was limited, but there's women who are also on dating apps all the time trying to find their person, trying to find their person. It's like they're looking for the one. And this kind of ties into the whole idea of decentering men and why it's important to decenter men. So, as someone who is working on a dating app, what are your thoughts on women decentering men and not being so aggressive in the chase for love and your husband and or even the reverse, your wife? I personally don't think the aggressive dating suits anybody, and I don't think it's a good strategy to find someone.
100%. And I think you know my thoughts on decentering men, but for the purpose of everyone who's like watching or listening or whatever, I would love to share them. I There's so much I could say on this topic because again, it's like it's a very interesting topic, especially as women who are, you know, at the stage of life that we're in, et cetera, et cetera. We've dated quite a bit, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like to give you some context, I've talked about this on my TikTok channel where I grew up with a mom who was quite a pick me. So like in a very pick
Oh
me
my God, can we
household.
talk about that? Can we talk about how your household deter Okay, I'll let you
Of
speak, but can we
course,
talk about
go
how your
for
household
it.
determine how your household and your mother determines how you date?
100%, 100%. I think our parents teach us what not to do. And some people learn that lesson and some people don't. Like some people just go through life repeating the same cycles. But then, there's people like me who thought I want to break the generational curse. And I know that sounds terrible, but when I say my mom was a pick me, I just mean things like I was raised in a household where, as a girl child, your main purpose in life was just going to be to cater to men. You were going to cater to your dad and your brother, and then you were going to be shipped off one day to cater to somebody else's son. And that just was not the life that I envisioned for myself. Like that just didn't really make sense to me. And so I had to unlearn a lot of things. I have a lot of grace for pick me women, particularly up to a certain stage. And I think that's because I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be indoctrinated in that way, particularly if you come from a religious household. My household was very Christian. And so there were so many things about dating and relationships that you don't even notice is like woven into your everyday life, like the indoctrination and the way that you are taught to do every single thing that you do, like it permeates every aspect of female life. And so I think for me, I started to actively unlearn all the things that I had picked up in my household, all the things that my mom, all the subtle ways my mom had like placed things in my head about how, oh, you can't do this, you can't go outside to play, you have to learn to cook because how are you going to feed your husband? Like, madam, I'm eight.
Okay. Can you give modern day pick me though definition? Because some people are probably listening and they're like, I mean, I'm not begging for anyone to pick me, so I'm not a pick me, but there are things, pick me 101s.
Mm-hmm.
How would
Yeah.
you define a pick me?
A pick me is any woman that's not a feminist. Let's start there. Like, that's radical to
Yeah.
say, but you have to really understand that we all started out as pick me's. There's no one today that can tell me they did not start out as a pick me. It's just impossible because, like I say, this goes beyond, oh, I want a man or I don't want a man. This is in our everyday messaging. It's in our everyday, it's in the symbols. It's in everything we engage with. The world is designed for women to be pick me's. So unless you're doing the active unlearning and positioning yourself in a position where it's like you're actively undoing all the what's it called, programming that you were taught, then you're definitely a pick me. So let's start there. I mean, there's so many different definitions of it, but yeah, I don't think it's as simple as, oh, well, I don't look for men to pick me, or making that statement. And it's funny because there were times coming towards my late 20s, like I was 26, 27, thinking I was completely cured of the pick-me-ism disease. And it would still manifest itself. It would still try to come back out. And I have to be like, no, no, go back down. Like, what is going on? So that is,
But what
honestly, it's
cured
been
you?
hard.
Like, what did you do to like cure you from your pick me sha
Yeah.
ways?
This is why I say, pick Michelle ways. This is why I say that I have a lot of grace for women who are still learning their way through it, because ultimately the key way to not be a pick me, the nicer way would be to learn from other people's mistakes. But sometimes you kind of have to learn the hard way through your own mistakes. You kind of have to see that the patriarchy doesn't reward you for following its rules and things like that. So ultimately I just had to learn the hard way. Like I already knew in theory, but I had to have my own experiences. And when I say experiences, I don't mean salty experiences with men. I don't mean bitterness because of dating. I mean literally looking around the world and experiencing the world and your eyes opening, frontal lobe developing. You kind of have to come to certain conclusions on your own. So unfortunately, it's just one of those ones. Like I can't really pick out any one pivotal moment, but I think it's just looking back at your life and looking at your mother, who was one of the key reasons why I was like, yeah, this is not the life I want for myself. Like looking at her and saying, this is such a beautiful woman. She went back to school after the age of 50 to go become a lawyer. Like all the crazy
Wow.
things. Like she's so smart, she's so talented, she's so beautiful, but ultimately she chose to live her life in a way that just really suppressed her so that she could, be someone's wife and be a mother. And I know she's my mother, so it's like, what the hell am I complaining about? No, I want her to be her own person. So yeah, it's just things like that that you kind of notice throughout your life, really.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't take away from the fact that she was a great mother, but I think for me, just generally, you realize that being a pick me, you never win. We want to do things that allow us to win and achieve the things that are important to us, but when you're a pick me, in the end, ultimately, you never, never win. And we see story times where women are like, they don't say they're pick me's, but they're like, let me tell you the story about how my husband cheated on me, took all my money, treated me like shit, even though I've done all these things for him. So I feel like one thing you start to realize is just pick me behavior. You ultimately like never win in society because society doesn't even reward you for being a pick me. So there's literally like no benefits. Like we're not built, the society's not built in a way that rewards pick me. So why are you being one? But yeah, I agree. There's no pivotal moment. It's just through your 20s, I think you start to realize that this is not serving me. Don't be a pick me. It's not going to benefit you. And then also, I honestly think on the topic of decentering men, I think if you're, besides what you mentioned earlier, which is really true, the whole idea of luck and what it plays in dating, I also think the best way to find someone or, meet someone that is aligned with you is through decentering men and just living a life that is like fulfilling, positive, that is self-serving. Like we use the word selfish and we think of it as a bad thing, but if you're in your 20s and chase your dreams, do the things that you want to do, fail repetitively, chase after your career goals, chase your travel, live your life day to day and doing the things that you want to do. I believe you'll meet someone who's aligned with that and you don't really need to be aggressively sitting on your phone and swiping all the time. And so I think like a lot more women need to be decentering men. And I know on TikTok and stuff, they look at it as a negative thing and a negative conversation. It's giving like man bashing and man hating, but essentially it's just like living your life for you. And a lot of women don't do that. We're so obsessed with partnership, even at a young age, and you don't even know what you're looking for in a partner. So,
Yeah, I think that all goes back to, sort of what we were talking about before I went on a complete tangent and lost the point somewhere in the bush. But it's like, obviously, I'm, dating quite intentionally because ultimately I have dissented men. I am living a fulfilling life. I think it would be nice to have a good partner. And I think that a good partner can actually bring a lot into your life. I get a lot of men say things like, oh, well, you're a feminist, so why do you even want to be with a man? And that's because I can be a feminist and still want to have a partner and still, be fine with that. And I think I'm one of those people who made my peace with, I don't mind if I die alone. I don't mind if we put a lot of negativity around the term die alone, but ultimately we're all going to die alone. And I'm quite happy to do that. And I feel like a partner has to, if a partner's going to come in, they have to enrich your life. And so that could be in every different way. That could be financially, that could be socially, that could be emotionally between the both of you. So there has to be more that you're both bringing into each other's lives to make this worth it for either person, to be honest. And I think that's why, one, I like to take my time when getting to know people and I'm not really rushing. But unfortunately, the dating apps are not set up for that. They're set up for you to be doing speed dating on your phone, right? So ultimately, there's no room for that. And then I think that the second thing there as well is that just with men and with the way the world is set up right now, when it comes to women's programming and when it comes to all the things that we have absorbed about romantic relationships, women just need to learn to start to see themselves as whole individuals outside of a relationship. Because what I see a lot is, I remember, I'll tell you a story. To me, it's still crazy. I think about this a lot. But when I was 25, I had just become like a really cool GM in this finance company. Long story, I've lived like 10 lives. I had this friend and I was
This is what I said at the beginning of this podcast is when I first met Barbie, I was like, does this girl have 9 personalities, 7 lives? This girl has 9 lives, yet I don't know who the hell she is.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like you're starting to like I'm an onion and you're starting to peel all the layers off. But yeah, no, for sure. I was in finance and I was talking to this girl who she'd started making big money, doing her own thing. And I was like, hey, I was thinking I should buy a house. There was this apartment I was looking at. I was like, I would love to buy an actual house, but I'm just going to have to buy an apartment. And she said to me, I kid you not, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, I think you should buy an apartment because when you get married, your husband's probably going to have a house and you're going to have to move into his house anyways. And I'm thinking to myself, so not only should I limit what I can purchase by just buying an apartment, even though I could probably afford more. You're not even encouraging me to like aim for more or anything. Not that, some people get an apartment, some apartments are more expensive than houses. That's not the point. But it's like her telling me, make sure you reduce yourself enough so that you don't intimidate this imaginary future man that might prospectively be your husband. So imagine I go through life making decisions in this way. When I get to what, 40, 50, and I don't have a husband, what then? Am I just gonna KMS? Like, is that like
That's your
what
13th
then?
reason. That's how you get to your
Okay.
13th
Right.
reason.
Because I bought an apartment for my imaginary man.
I did everything right.
I
Why is he not
did.
here?
We have to start living our own lives outside of this imaginary man that's always watching us. Oh, don't do this because men don't like this. Or the kind of man that does this doesn't like this. Or who cares? Like you're a whole person, you're a whole individual. What do you like?
I don't even know how to give advice on that because I don't know, maybe it starts with your friendship. Maybe put the energy that you put into finding a man into finding really solid friendships, which is really hard to find because I can guarantee you if you're a pick me, you probably don't have a lot of you maybe have a lot of friends-ish acquaintances, but you probably don't have a lot of like good friends, close friends. I don't know. So maybe like that's a step to kind of get away from the pick me behavior, but
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. I've heard stuff like that before, and honestly, I've heard stuff like that from my mom. Like, don't do
Yeah,
this
definitely. I
because,
would
like,
expect that from our moms.
yeah, don't do this because, your husband's not gonna like that. And I'm like, what imaginary husband?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's always like, I'll pray for, and even like religious family members too, every time they see me, like, you haven't seen me, you see me twice a year, once a quarter maybe, and you're like, the last thing you do when I leave is like praying. I'm praying you find a husband. I'm praying. And I'm like,
That is so our moms. Like literally my mom is the exact same. I'm sure many people can relate to this because I was going for a wedding recently, like my girl's wedding. And I told her my best friend's getting married. Like, well, one of my best friends is getting married. And she was like, your turn is coming soon. Just be patient. Whole time I'm excited. I'm going to London for this amazing Vogue wedding. And we're talking about me. How did we make this about me?
and it's almost like, do you pity me? Slash, why are you making fake trauma for me that I don't have?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. People definitely pity me. I think once you get to a certain age as well, I noticed that a lot because it's so funny. I was going to talk about this as well, but when I turned 30, which is I just turned 30 in November, I made a post talking about how I've been waiting my whole life to be 30. Because I'm Italian, so like in Italy, women don't do anything before the age of 30. Before the age of 30, you're a child. You're practically a baby. Um, so I was like, I couldn't wait to be 30 because that's just like the age where you become a woman. And when I shared that video, everyone was DMing me and saying congratulations on being so brave for mentioning your age. Like,
I'm
how
sorry,
did you do
Barbie.
it? How did you do
That's
it?
not the bravest thing you've ever done.
It's, I've never been congratulated on my bravery, and it's for talking about my age. So I'm
I'm
just like,
dead.
I had ever since then, I've had people say the strangest things to me. I congratulated a guy on getting married. He's quite young, a little too young to be getting married, in my opinion, but that's just my
Yeah.
opinion. And he was like, well, I will be praying for your turn. Thanks.
And you know what makes it so annoying is like, how do you tell people, can you collectively pray for me so I continue to achieve my goals? Everything that is self-centered to me, pray for me there.
I think maybe they mean well. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's nice for you to pray for me to have a good partner.
Yeah.
That would be nice, right? But like, is that the only thing you're praying for me for? Like, maybe they think we're all perfect in our lives already, and we're just all we're doing is sat there waiting for this man to walk in through the door and start to control our lives so that they can have finally our lives can have meaning. So I don't know what it is, but I accept it in good faith.
Yeah.
Um, but unfortunately it's the way they've been programmed and they don't know any better. And I think you said something interesting about pick me and how people can cure their pick me and I think genuinely you really have to be going out of your way to learn. You cannot just watch a few episodes of a cool podcast or see a few things on TikTok here and there. I mean, TikTok does teach you quite a lot when it comes to decentering men and unlearning all the nonsense. But you kind of have to do a lot of reading. And I think this goes for men and women as well, because decentering doesn't just have to be, I mean, decentering men is important because our whole lives are programmed around men, but men have some decentering to do. Men kind of have to decenter men too. So
Yeah.
ultimately you have to be actively going out. I remember when I was trying to learn, I was in the library, I was reading bell hooks, I was reading all the like proper, even more advanced feminist literature, doing my research and trying to understand why the world was the way it was. And much like everything is about race, everything is also about sexism. So it kind of just ties in. If you're not actively learning, it's not going to be enough for you to make friends, because you'll make friends with women and you will fall out with them in 2 months, 2 business months. I promise you that. You cannot maintain a healthy female friendship unless you have done some decentering. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think and 2 months is really generous. In these days, it's 2 business days. 2 business days. It's an ick, but I was gonna say too, I mean, I'm so impressed that you actually were doing a lot of reading. I have done some reading because obviously like pick me's and decentering men is like a new concept, but we knew what it was. We just didn't have a label for it. But
oh,
for me,
wow.
honestly, I'm gonna be honest, it was like dating experiences for me. And it was dating experiences for me with men who were not that great to me because they centered themselves.
Yeah.
And so when you date someone who centers themselves as they should, who loves themselves as they should, who is very self-serving in terms in a healthy way for their goals, what they want to achieve in life, what they're looking for, and you're centering them and they're centering them, you end up extremely disappointed in dating because you feel like, men are not showing up for you. You're going out of your way and like stretching yourself to do things. It's not reciprocated. You just get into this habit of just doing too much for a man, and you realize a man who's centering himself doesn't give you any bonus points for doing any of that. So you start to realize that like you kind of need to center yourself as well. And I think two people who center themselves actually end up in a much more healthier relationship because they're there because the relationship has like mutual benefit, but they also put themselves first. So for me, honestly, it was experience type of learning, um, which I give people grace for. Like, especially in your 20s, you have to learn, you have to date, you have bad experiences, and hopefully you learn from those experiences, you reflect and you kind of look back at like, what did I do to get me in this bad situation that ended in a way that I didn't want?
Yeah, but ultimately, I mean, I fully hear where you're coming from. And I think it's not just stuff that you did, right? Like we can take accountability all we want till the chickens come home or whatever that saying, however that saying goes. We can do that all we want, but ultimately society is kind of set up like that as well. So it's
Yeah.
also giving yourself grace as you learn. And I just think that with men, there's kind of a very fine line to thread there because um I just think that men also have a very unhealthy way of centering themselves, and
Ooh, speak
perhaps
on it.
that's not right. Like perhaps that's not what we should all be like that. They're not the gold standard for centering themselves, although we have a lot to learn from them. So I love that you kind of picked up on that and you were like, yeah, I'm gonna kind of emulate this in my life or the way that it benefits me. But we have to take those lessons from men and then ultimately go ahead and say, how can I do this in a way that's healthy for my life and for my station and for the different things that I want for my life? Because men have a very selfish way of centering themselves that really just puts them, obviously that you're in the driver's seat of your life, that's fine, but like it puts them and other people at risk as well. And that's not the kind of centering yourself that we want to get to. It's like I have friends who I talk to about, for example, um, things like sexual relationships, right? Where we talk about how I like to be quite picky with the partners that I go for. And I know that there are women who might be less picky. And while that's okay, the argument I always hear is like, well, men do it and men don't get any judgment for it. Well, how about we should all be more picky? You know, that's just like my opinion. Obviously, I'm not pushing that on anybody else, but it's like men being the gold standard for the way that we should behave is, I mean, look around you, look at the world, like look where we are. It's not because men are well behaved or anything like that. So again, very controversial thing for someone who's building a dating app for both men and women, but it is factual. Men and women have a lot to unlearn. Women have so much to unlearn, and men have a lot to unlearn in the same vein. But it's not one of those things that goes both ways where men decenter women, women decenter men. Yes, men should decenter women, but what that looks like for them is entirely different. It could look like, you know, stop policing women on what they wear, stop worrying about other women's bodies who aren't your body, you know, they're not even your wife's body, and stop worrying about your wife's body perhaps, and maybe don't give too much, have a little bit more discipline when it comes to engaging with women around the world, when it comes to engaging with insta baddies, when it comes to engaging with pornography. There is so much that we can say about this topic where everyone should just really be honing a healthy version of themselves. And that comes from, you know, looking within you and going, what is it that I can offer to myself? And then how can me offering this to myself improve the world at large? Like, how can I make an impact on other people who I care about? Maybe not the whole world, but, you know, touch someone's life in a positive way. Have you done that today, perhaps? So,
I
so
don't know if
yeah,
I
it's
can
my
say anything
sermon.
after that. Yeah, but I mean, I
Yeah.
totally get what you're saying. Men are not the great example of the world of how to act. But I was more so just thinking one thing I have noticed with men generally, and again, I hate to generalize all men, but it's more so just the little things. You know, I've seen friends who cancel on their friends because their boyfriend is available all of a sudden. Or you're like, you know what, I'm gonna skip my Pilates class tonight because I want to spend more time with him. But he would never skip his strength training class. Or, you know, he has something upcoming for work and he's doing the math on how much time he needs to invest in that so he can get that promotion or that result. And you're just spending all the time at his apartment, not thinking about work. And just like the little things where I have to say men generally are more
Yes,
better at looking out for themselves day to day. And you
100%.
and you're here like canceling on your friends and then you wonder why you don't have friends. And I do find that they're just a little bit more
They're
self.
into themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah, they love themselves more for sure, definitely.
they love themselves. So I'm curious because on the flip side, like, of course, you and I, we're always for the women all the
Girls,
time,
girl.
girls, girl. But I'm curious through your research, and I know this is going to be hard for you, Barbie, but I'm curious through
Oh,
your
what is
research.
it? Are you asking me to talk shit about women?
No, I'm at the opposite
I would
actually.
never.
You would never. I actually want you to talk about what you've learned in your research on men and kind of their struggles as well. Because let's be real, men
Oh,
do struggle in
yes.
dating, and there are men out there who are looking for something serious, not serious, whatever. But I mean, men do struggle as well in dating, and there's a lot of things that they experience. So for the girlies listening, give us a little insight into the male brain and dating.
100%. I think I had a lot of insight into the male brain before I even started interviewing them, but I was very careful to not go into this with any sort of cognitive, any biases or anything like that. I wanted to have a clear, clean, open mind. And it turned out to be more positive than I had expected, quite frankly, because I went in there thinking they were going to be telling me all kinds of scary stories. I went in there thinking I was going to hear the most misogynistic types of things. But I was surprised to find that a lot of men are actually big softies. Like, obviously I don't know these men inside out, but it was just so interesting to see like how much they wanted love and they wanted to be loved, whether or not they had reached the level of self-awareness to understand what that looks like and what empathy looks like. All that's irrelevant, right? But at their very core, they really wanted something real. I will say that there was there's a small percentage of, well, a small percentage for the specific sample population I was looking at. And I also, small caveat here, the sample population I was looking at was intentionally at people who had had a serious relationship in the past. And also there were a few different things that I was looking for just in terms of like, what does an eligible partner look like? And perhaps that's a conversation, details for another day, and I'll be sharing that on my TikTok and stuff. But I think with them, I was just so surprised to see, how many men get nervous before the date and how they're all scared of being judged and, perceived by women. And they all talked about this is so funny. I think I mentioned this to you in a private conversation where I said, the men that we asked what their biggest fear was, they all went catfishing, catfishing, catfishing. But the real biggest fear from the interviews and going through the scripts and getting ChatGPT to analyze the scripts was that they were afraid of being perceived. They were afraid that the girl would come and she would judge them harshly, and then she would go back to her group chat and tell everybody, oh, this man did this or made this mistake or said this thing, and he would become a laughing stock in their group chat, in this imaginary group chat. So I don't know, like that kind of surprised me to just see how much they actually want romance, whether or not they have the tools to execute that romance. And I think that brings me to my next point of another thing I observed. A lot of men do not have the tools, like they're not equipped emotionally or financially to handle their part of the bargain under the patriarchy of what romance looks like.
Oh, speak
So
on that. What does that mean?
right. So, I mean, it's quite simply this. Women have been raised to do a certain thing their whole lives, right? We've been talking about how we've been programmed to do this for men and lower ourselves and diminish our light, not be too outspoken, not be too much, not be too this, be more feminine, etc., etc. And men also have a part to play. Like they also have a role that they have to perform, because a lot of femininity and masculinity as a concept is performance. And a lot of this performance is financial. You have to kind of be able to take a woman out and pay for the date. And, there's conversations about 50-50 that we probably don't have to get into, but you have to kind of do things because you're the man. And under the patriarchy, the man makes the first move. The man is the one that moves the relationship from one stage to the next. He's the one that proposes. He's the one that usually asks you out on the date. And even if he's not, he's the one that asks you to be his girlfriend. Because when was the last time you saw heterosexual boyfriends and girlfriends say, will you be my boyfriend? Like, it's just not something that happens, and it goes against the rules of the patriarchy. So I think in this instance, there are a lot of men who don't know how to take women on dates. They don't know how to plan dates. They don't have the money to plan nice dates in their minds, even though not all dates require the financial resource. But I guess their own opinion of what their money, or their opinion of what they should be capable of doing has a lot to do with having the financial resources for it. So they feel like they can't meet up, they can't what's it called, compete in the dating market with the men who can. And so for some of them it manifests itself as a form of like defensiveness, where they're like, well, women shouldn't want that anyway, just because they can't afford it and they know they can't afford it. But for
Yeah.
some others, it makes them just more it makes them sort of retract and go, well, I guess I'm not worthy of dating right now. Maybe I need to focus on getting my money up, or maybe I need to focus on doing all these other things. And of course, there's like, the patriarchal message that's feeding some negativity into this as well. And maybe they're not doing it for all the good reasons. But there are genuinely people out there, men out there, who are looking for love and think that they just don't have the resources to find love because they can't compete for women's attention. And of course, they obviously want the baddest of the baddies. So it all goes back to that. And I'm now mindful that I'm blabbing and I want to be careful of that. So,
No, this
yeah.
is good. This is good. I love it. I agreed though, honestly, the chicken and an egg because it's like, okay, so there's an awareness of men that they feel like they can't compete. Men sometimes may feel financially insecure and therefore it translates to them feeling like they can't compete. Should they compete or should they think of a different strategy? What are they supposed to do? Or are you just supposed to continue to attempt to date, even if you may not, even if you do feel financially, for example, insecure and that's your thing?
Well, they are competing, whether or not
Yeah.
they realize it. Like to not compete is to compete, and like that's an old Chinese saying, anyways. And it's like the ones who are saying that women need to lower their expectations. That's a strategy. That's a competitive strategy. They are
Yeah.
saying to women, they're trying to shame women into accepting the resources that they have so that they can have more options, and that's their tactic for doing it. And a lot of women are buying into it. And the ones who are going, well, I want to save up. I want to have more money so that I can get a woman that I think is going to be socially badder than the rest. That kind of feeds into the same sort of sociological aspects of dating, where you want what all the other men want. So for them, it's quite interesting. And I think rather than even asking whether or not they should compete, because I think love is one of those things that, not to sound like a complete sop,
You're a
like
stop.
like while you have to think about finances and you have to think about resources, I think that's really important in any partnership. um Love is one of those things that you can't just say to yourself, oh, I'm going to work my ass off for the next 20 years and then finally I will fall in love with a woman. It's probably not going to be love at that point, because you're being very mechanical about it. And you're probably going to meet somebody who understands the value of that sociological exchange, where it's like, I want a man who has lots of money, and you're saying, I want a woman who is very, very beautiful. What you're bringing together on that basis is probably not love. It is something, and it's not necessarily anything negative, but it's just, let's all be very mindful of where our preferences are coming from and where our ideas for what a perfect partner looks like. And that's one of the things that you have to unlearn as well. I mean, as a man, as a woman, whoever you are, you kind of have to unlearn a lot of the programming. A lot of men want women that other men want and other men have approved of, whether it's like a specific beauty standard or things like that. And in so doing, I'm not saying that they need to look at other women who don't meet their preferences, but it's like, if you want to compete, sometimes you have to prioritize other things. But in order to do that, that has to come from within yourself. That has to come from what you prioritize in yourself. So if you're a
Yeah.
man who prioritizes money, you're probably going to be prioritizing very surface level things as well in a woman. And there's just so much more that goes into it. But yeah, it's not as simple as like, don't
Yeah, but
date if you don't have.
also, yeah, don't date is like really unfair. It's like telling us to just sit in your cage and like, don't live your life. But I mean, it just even ties back to just the obvious research that we hear all the time about dating apps in that, and I don't, nobody quote me, but essentially the research is that most women go for like top 10 for 10%, 15% of men on dating apps. And so that means that beautiful women, successful women, rich women, whatever, all types of women, tall, short, are going for a specific type of man on dating apps, which have been usually attractive men who are doing well financially. And then those men have a lot of options. And then that kind of ties back into maybe relationships that do work are maybe just people who are kind of equally yoked. And like, that's another controversial thing. It doesn't mean you have to date someone who's on the same level as you, but I'm just saying that
Well,
sometimes a lot with those dating apps and the constant swiping and why it's so exhausting is because a large group of people are going for a small group of people, and a small group of people has all this access to a large group of women. So, at least from heterosexual relationships. But I'm excited with what you're doing with Summon because I feel like you're going to kind of change that behavior. That's why I really love what Barbie's working on with Summon because I feel that we're going with her app, we're going away from the obsessive swiping all the time, being on dating apps, and more so of a curated experience. So I'm really excited for you guys to summon when it's ready. I will put all the details in the podcast description. Thank you guys so much for listening today. All of Barbie's handles for social media are going to be in the description as well. And yeah, let me know your thoughts, comments on dating, decentering men. Have you decentered men? How it's worked out for you? And yeah, I'll see you guys next week on another episode. Bye.